Hello and welcome to the Trusted Professional Podcast provided by the New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants. I'm Calvin Harris, a CPA and Chief Executive Officer of the Society, and I'm honored to be your host. This is a new podcast provided by NYSSCPA, where I'll be interviewing leaders in the accounting profession in New York and beyond, as well as those who influence this space. For today's show, we're going to provide news that you need to be informed on what's happening in the profession. Following that, we'll have an interview with Kevin O'Leary, the board president of the New York State Society. But first, our news. Our first article comes from New York's own Trusted Professional publication, where we discuss how 1/3 of U.S. accounting firms are in private equity talks. Yes, 10 of the 30 largest U.S. accounting firms are in acquisition or investment negotiations with private equity firms, with at least 4 groups holding deal talks following the transactions involving Grant Thornton and Baker Tilly. Now, regulators are monitoring whether PE ownership could affect the quality of audit work. Securities and Exchange Chief Accountant Paul Bernter said last week the firm leaders need to be sensitive to the message such arrangements could send and stand ready to correct such misimpressions, as reported by the Financial Times. What's my take on that? Private equity is happening. It's already been happening, and it's an area firms can take advantage of. While there will always be concerns on audit quality and making sure that we're doing what we need to as CPAs, that part is not a new part for us. So for firms that are interested in private equity, I certainly would encourage you to do so. But private equity is something that we will continue to hear and will continue to monitor for you. The next article comes through the PCAOB itself. Erica Williams has been selected to serve a second term as chair of PCAOB. The Securities and Exchange Commission has reappointed Erica Y. Williams to serve as chair of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, or PCAOB, and her term will begin on October 25th of this year and expire on October 24th of 2029. Essentially, that is a continuation, second term, so her new term will really be the continuation of her in service. This is certainly notable to CPAs, as PCAOB, particularly under Chair Williams' watch, has certainly continued their efforts in terms of oversight, if not ramped up some of the activities that you'll see. I would encourage members to continue monitoring PCAOB for activities, as they've been considerably more active group under Chair Williams' watch. Our last article involves non-CPA ownership here in New York. As you hopefully know, New York State Society finally got non-CPA ownership passed, making New York the 49th state of the 50 to pass this legislation. It will become effective in New York on September the 1st of 2024. We're happy to update you now, as of our taping, that the information is already live on the state's website, and that includes the forms that you would need to use non-CPA ownership. As a reminder, non-CPA ownership is an optional opportunity for CPAs, as all it simply means is that now firms are able to bring on non-CPAs as equity owners, whereas that option was not available previously. But also note that the Professional Corporations Unit will work with companies that may need amendments. For example, one caveat is that there is an additional fee for a non-CPA ownership. Also, you should know that the non-CPA law does not apply to general partnerships. You can continue to monitor the State Society's website, as we will continue to work with the state with the implementation of this important legislation. That concludes our news section for this episode. Please continue to monitor our podcast, as we will provide you news and notes on every episode. But now, let's switch to our interview for the day. Our guest today is Kevin O'Leary, the board president of the New York State Society of CPAs. Kevin became managing partner of MMB & Co. in their Albany office in 2019. In June 1 of 2024, Kevin was elected president of the State Society. Previously, he had been president, president-elect, secretary, and treasurer of the Northeast chapter of the Society. And because of his role with the New York State Society, he's also now a council member for the AICPA. Kevin graduated from Hartwick College in New York, where he played 4 years of college football and received his bachelor's degree in accounting. During his downtime, he enjoys coaching basketball and flag football at St. Gregory School, as well as playing golf with his kids. His wife, Tara, is also a CPA, and they are proud parents of 2 awesome boys and future CPAs. They just don't know it yet. That's Mason and Nick. Hi, Kevin. How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
I can't complain. Not at all. Really glad to be here. Really glad to chat. We just recently had our leadership conference at the Lodge of Squirrel Lake. Everyone is still excited about what happened there. So I'm really excited to talk to you, not just following up on that great event that you helped lead, but also want to have our listeners get to know you. Know you better. Beyond the bio I read a little early, want to just ask you a few questions, and let's start with your origin story of sorts. So what was your journey into the field of accounting? How did you get from there to here?
Growing up, I considered myself probably entrepreneurial because my parents were the types of parents that said, hey, if you want something, you got to buy it with your own money. We didn't come from a lot.
That's familiar.
Like a lot of us. And so mowed lawns, shoveled driveways, sold baseball cards, umpired baseball games, anything I could do to grab $1 here and there. And I think that entrepreneurial spirit, as well as trying to figure out how to create funds to spend funds. I never took an accounting class. I don't think I knew any accountants growing up. I went to college at Hartwick College in Oneonta to play football, and I was an economics general major and had to take some accounting courses as a part of that curriculum early on. And honestly, I've said this before a few times, I was very drawn to the major of accountancy because of the 2 professors that I had very early on in my career, who were Tom Sears and Penny Whiteman. And the 2 of them just did a phenomenal job of introducing me to that accounting program. They didn't warn me as to how hard it was going to get in years 2, 3, and 4, but I was just blown away by the puzzle that it presented and how it was always going to present a challenge in a sense. But even then, for me, probably like yourself, all I could see were the books were just so big, and it was kind of hard to bring that all into a focus. And then I was so lucky to meet a partner here at the firm going into my junior year, and he brought up this thing called an internship. And once I did that, I was sold. I started working on real life things. I started getting real life experiences. They would take me out to lunch. I played in a basketball league with a bunch of other professionals. Like all those things together, I was sold on it, honestly. And taking the classes, I think I had the benefit, like I said, of having 2 professors that were real life practitioners. They had their own small practices. So they taught in that manner. And they just showed so much excitement about what they did for their clients and their communities and their family members and things like that. And that really stuck with me. But the internship here at the firm was the selling point of it all. And really, at that point I was hooked. I look back and I'm like, I don't know why, but it's a culmination of a bunch of like happenstance things that popped up. And so here we are 25 years later since I graduated Hartwick College, and still working at the same firm and still enjoying every bit of it.
That's great and fantastic. And I suspect that much of what you just said will resonate with a lot of folks. I know for me, even to this day, many decades later, I remember the names of 2 specific professors who made such a huge impact on accounting. Not coincidentally, to your point, I didn't think of this until you said it. One of them was a practitioner. She talked about her experience in public and how important it was to know certain things, and also an internship. I had an internship as a graduating senior in high school at an accounting firm. All I did make copies. Back when interns would just make copies, but it was not dissimilar to what that exposure and the excitement of those professors made a huge difference. So it's good to hear that we got it there. You can't help but wonder, I know I do sometimes, that if we unfortunately had challenging professors, I don't mean that in a negative way, that the work is tough. Of course, the classes can be tough, but just people who weren't positive, just wonder whether that would have even had the exact opposite effect of saying, hey, we don't want to be in this profession. Everyone seems so miserable.
Yeah, and that was the thing. So you look back and it's a little it's gray now because it's 25 years ago. Right. And then my freshman and sophomore years where you're really attracted to the people who have a desire and an affection for what they teach. So early on in my college career, I always wonder if there was actually a professor who was on sabbatical that was supposed to teach accounting 101. And I always wonder, okay, maybe if that professor taught that class, I wouldn't have such an affection for the class. So all the ducks that had to get in a row to actually make an introduction for me into this profession, into the major. And then actually I was able to stay with those two professors for most of my 4 years at the school. I think that had a huge impact on kind of the continuing through it all.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I don't really think that changes over the years, even irrespective of how the information gets provided. Even if we think about the most recent impact pipeline advisory, one of the things that they talked about specifically was the college experience and how critical that is to getting younger people, and sometimes not so young people, interested in the profession. Those professors can make a huge difference on it.
Yeah, this really isn't a knock towards any professor who's not a former practitioner.
Sure, of course, right.
But having been able to tell stories about the impacts that they had on their clients, real life scenarios. I could still remember some business law stories from my business law professor that were amazing to me.
Yeah.
Actually being able to give me some of those in the weeds, really impactful moments that they had in there, it really stuck with me, honestly. And so I hope that if there are professors out there that maybe don't have that experience, that they can rely and call on someone like the society to get real practitioners in to provide some of that color. Because I think it's huge for the future of the profession to hear about some of the impacts we've had on people's lives. It's really amazing stuff when you think about it.
I think that's such a good point. And certainly for any professors, accounting or otherwise hearing us, there are organizations, certainly like here in New York, where we have professionals ready to come in the classroom and frankly are excited to talk to your students. You certainly don't have to do it alone, because organizations like ours, certainly a number of others throughout the country, are very interested in coming to the classroom and helping you out. So I suspect you might be touching on this even with your last answer, but with that sort of thing in mind, where do you see our challenge, or even what are the biggest challenges you think we're dealing with as a profession?
To me, there is probably two early stage hurdles, I would say. One is getting freshmen and sophomores in college to see maybe longer term as to how beneficial having this, having an accounting major, have an accounting degree, what that can do for you. And I think there are thousands of examples out there of how important it is to have that as a major and a degree, and you don't have to work in public accounting, right? Honestly, when I first took a couple steps into accounting as my major, I thought, okay, at some point I really want to own my own business. And I think it'll be easier to learn marketing and business development and sales pipeline, all that stuff on the fly. But if I don't know accounting, it's hard to learn that after the fact. You don't have the foundational support.
Yeah.
So if you don't understand your numbers, how successful as an entrepreneur can you be? So that was one of the early thought processes I had. But I think that freshman, sophomore class, statistically, it seems like there are a lot of people who aren't picking accounting. And I think, as I've said 1,000 times, we don't do a great job of promoting the really positive things in our profession. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the articles that are written are by people who have left the profession, who have never been in the profession, or just had a bad taste. And it's like those articles seem to dominate. So we got to do a little bit better job of self-promoting within that area. And then I think too, it's that first probably 4 years of your career in public accounting, if you go to public accounting route, where you're getting used to working. There's a couple of points during the years when you probably have to do more hours than some of your friends might have to do in other professions. You're trying to get that CPA license. It's a large mountain to climb. And so I think the firms that can help provide the coaching programs, the CPA training modules, all those things will certainly help our success rate in keeping those people in the profession. that's my kind of partner in a firm answer, because I like to see people stay in public because of public accounting. But wearing my hat as the state society president, I think it's just making sure that people understand how great of a profession this is, whether you're in industry, whether you're in public, whatever it may be. And the doors that this opened, when you look at the amount of CEOs that are CPAs of publicly traded companies, when you look at how many CPAs are on boards, not only in treasury positions, it's by far, if not the most trusted professional out there. And when people see that CPA designation on your business card or in your LinkedIn, whatever it is, it holds weight.
Sure does.
I mean, it really does. And so I think those are my longer term pipeline looking at, I think if we can get people to be engaged and introduced to an exciting profession early on in their college years, and then upon graduation, that first 4-year window where you're really, life is completely different for many reasons.
Sure is, right. Yeah.
And continue to work with those individuals as to how promising of a career this can be. I think we could do ourselves a lot of benefit in the long term.
I think that's such a good point, important point, Kevin. I think on my own experience fell into that stereotypical, and I guess in a good way, starting your career in public and enjoying the experience, and didn't necessarily stay in public beyond that 4-year cutoff where you often make decisions on whether it's going to be the long-term future or not. But no doubt the public experience exposed me to the industries I love. So it's not surprising the industries that I've spent most of my career in are the same ones I began with. But it's all such an amazing way to start the profession, but it ends up being, to your point, so critical to help people get used to the experience. I remember when I first started, one of the things that blew me away, which I struggled with, was something as simple as I'm supposed to call this partner by his or her first name. And that blew me away. I could not get my head around it, that I'm supposed to call this person who was old enough to be my father, I'm supposed to call him Jim, the name of the managing partner at Anderson when I started. And I could not get my head around, called Mr. Brady. I'm not Mr. Brady, I'm Jim. It's like, all right, if you say so. But even something as minor as that, it's just a very different experience when you're starting your career. And hopefully if you're in a welcoming environment like I was happy to be in, you love the experience, even if you don't say it, but it becomes so critical, to your point, to face that challenge. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think too, even look at your role now as executive director of the State Society of CPAs here in New York.
Yeah.
I love the fact that I know that you've been through it. Like you walked in my shoes, right? You were an accountant in a public accounting firm. And so when we talk a lot about these things, I know it's been a while since you did it, but it's those things. Like, you understand them, and your experience is probably completely different than mine because you were a Big Four and I've always been at a regional firm, but it just helps knowing that you've walked in my shoes. So when we talk about things, I know you're very respectful of the fact that, hey, this is what they're talking about. So even from that perspective, it's amazing where that CPA designation can take you, honestly.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's such a good point. I got to say too, even the thing on students, I happen to think I got a really great exposure to becoming a CPA, and certainly at my school, they talked it up. Even with all that exposure, I had no earthly idea of some of the opportunities a person can have with a CPA, and they talked about it a lot. So I think one of the reasons I end up so excited when it comes to the younger people and the professional people switching over as a second career are, gosh, I've been a CPA now almost 30 years, which is frightening to say. But the things that I've been able to do, I'll say on the back half of that 30, were not things that were talked about right in college. So I'm always amused and amazed at how many things you can do with the credential. And to your point, with all due respect to so many other credentials out there, there is something about being a CPA that you're just automatically thought of as an expert in accounting and business, which to me, I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and I've always thought too, going back, I've always wondered if I went back and asked Tom Sears and Penny Whiteman, my two professors that had such an impact on me, if they thought back then that I could be the person managing partner of a firm, state society president. I think we'd get all a pretty big chuckle. I was never the greatest student in the world. Some of these things were hard for me to comprehend. As you move on through your career, you realize that there's no way to know it all. There's just no way to know it all. So it's one of these things where, like you were saying, people expect you to know everything. I know what I know, and then I surround myself with experts. You make all these connections because at some point you're going to have to call on these people to help.
Yeah, that's true. And you actually touch on one of the next things I wanted to ask you. And I'll say, we'll exclude the obvious one of that all CPAs do taxes, because that's a low-hanging fruit. But what's a concept or opinion you think the majority of people get wrong about us as CPAs?
I would say, because I've seen this firsthand and speaking at some colleges in the area and throughout New York State, is how shocked people are when I talk about the ability to be an entrepreneur inside of what we do.
Oh, such a good point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, listen, it's not for everybody. Not everybody in our firm wants to do business development or wants to do marketing and those types of things. Completely fine, right? And like you, I always look at our firm makeup as like a batting lineup in baseball, right? There are reasons why people bat in certain parts of the order. Some people don't hit home runs. Some people hit singles. Some people move the runners, whatever it may be. But you find a way to make 1 through 9 work so that your firm works at its best, most optimal way. But when I talk to students about going out and trying to bring in new business to the firm and new clients to the firm and what that does and what that means, sometimes it means dinner, sometimes it means golf, sometimes it means going to the city, sometimes it means going to Buffalo, whatever it is, they're always a little shocked by that component of the profession. And so that to me is one of the things I think that sticks out very easily in my mind. I think the other thing that I hear a lot about is people talk about the hours. And to me, my first answer and response is, hey, if you want to be Steph Curry, or if you want to be the greatest lawyer in the country, or if you want to be the best doctor in the world, or if you want to be anything of a certain level, there's a commitment to that perfection and profession. And so once you get to a certain level, I think you can say, hey, listen, I only want to do so many hours, or I want to, but in order to really engulf and bring in all these things, I think it takes a commitment on every individual's part. Are there times of the year when we're busy? Yeah, but when we're in tax season, I'm a tax partner. When we're in tax season, I look at that like that's our Super Bowl, right? That's our NCAA tournament. That's our big time of year. And it's amazing to watch all of our people come together, help each other out, make sure no one's getting left behind. All these things that, like, as a former sports college athlete, you just see that team environment, and it really makes the hours not the biggest deal in the world. So constantly hearing people ask me and talk about hours and hours, yeah, there are buckets there, and it does take some, but I don't think it's crazy when you think about how, if you want to be good at something, like, you need to do it.
That's such a good point, and such an important point, and I agree. I think this is one where we in the profession, we fumble this one. Sticking with sports analogy, we fumble this one so often, as if other professions of note don't have hours in their job. I use an example, talking to a colleague earlier about a surgeon. You're a surgeon. I know when I've had a minor surgery, it was very early. Or if you're a surgeon, you may be operating at all hours of the day and night. That's the job. That's what it requires. That's not normal, but that's where it comes in. If you're a lawyer, the preparation, it will be hours and hours that no one gets to see. And certainly in sports, when we look at the people that we really admire, I can't think of a single exceptional athlete where I haven't heard him or her talk about how hard they actually work, that even if they had talent, they had a lot of talent, that they still chose to make the time to really drill themselves, to really hone their skills to a level of expertise. And I think accounting is no different. I know that certainly applied when it came to me passing the CPA exam.
Yeah.
I like to think I had a really good education, but I still had to put in the hours and put in the time to pass. So I think that's a really important thing. You had mentioned earlier about the excitement and the engagement and the travel. Even now, I don't know if they talk about green eye shades as much and pocket protectors, but I do often come around a lot of students who assume that our jobs only take place at a desk in a corner. And, sometimes you might put yourself in that corner. But more often than not, a lot more excitement, a lot more engagement than we often give ourselves credit for. So I'm glad you made that point there. So now I have one question, a bit of a thought experiment, if you could hear me here.
Yeah.
So if you had unlimited resources, here's the good news. You're president of society, so who knows, you might be able to do this. If you had unlimited resources with no constraint, what innovative project or initiative would you undertake to improve the accounting profession?
I think, to me, if I had unlimited resources, I think one of the first pushes would be to get a lot more interaction with the general public about what we do. And so that means high schools, that means colleges, that means anybody who will listen. And I've said this before, is we're probably one of the only professions that doesn't have its own TV show. So we got to be our TV show. We got to be out there talking about the impact we made when our clients called us about selling their business, when their clients called us about their father passing away, when their clients called us about how do I pay for my kids to go to college. All these questions we get on a day-to-day basis. And I will tell you, most of them are the most important questions a lot of these people will ever entertain, right, when they call us first. So spreading that word throughout the environment of people who don't necessarily know who we are would be my first. And I think that would be a long-term vision. Thinking shorter term, I would love to see us figure out a way to make the profession a little bit more accessible for people who don't necessarily know someone in it who looks like them. Especially when you get out into the rural areas, we have a tendency to not be very diverse. And I think we could do a much better job of promoting throughout communities, throughout New York State, especially to show more that we do. I also think that as technology comes and starts to change and we see AI and all these other things that are going to start changing, it would be great for us to really be able to implement those efficiently into our profession so that they'll help us. They'll never replace us, right? That will,
Sure.
But I think we can use a lot of those tools to help with us, especially on the audit side of the practice. And then I think one last thing would be to figure out a way, and this is an issue you and I have talked about, and it's a little bit different here in New York, is figure out a way for state education department, the colleges of New York, and the profession of accountant to come together and figure out what's the best thing we can do for the future of the profession and the future students that will engage with this profession. And almost go clean slate and say, if we could, we would almost pose this question to that group. If you had unlimited resources, if you could do anything you want, what would be the best thing for the future accountants of our profession? And then figure out the rate of investment, all these things that we factor, how expensive college is, all these things that have to be factored in. What's the best thing that we can come up with? Is it 4 + 1? Is it 150? Is it 3 + 2? Is it whatever it might be? How can we best figure out clean slate what that looks like, and then try it? Just try it, right? It can always be changed. It can always be tweaked. But as I talk to a lot of professionals, not only here in New York State, but throughout the country, that issue comes up more than any other issue, I would say, at this point in time.
Yeah.
And so when you start to be on state societies, and because of this, I'm on AICPA council, you really feel like you want to take what you hear and try and get some change enacted, right? But a lot of people don't understand how hard that is to do.
Gotcha.
When you pose the question in the Santa Claus kind of world, this would be my answer. So those are probably some of them.
I love that. And yeah, to your point, you speak of Santa Claus. I got to admit, as a child, one of the things I struggled with the most when it came to Santa Claus, we lived in an apartment. I was like, how's he getting in here? There's no chimney. I was like, something doesn't add up here. You know,
and our chimney was about 6 inches wide. So I had the same question all the time. And I was always like, we're always have a fire on Christmas Eve. I don't understand how he's...
It doesn't add up for me. I was questioning things at a young age. But to your point, particularly when it comes to the way we have things here in New York, certainly in New York State, like so many other states, well, every state has some regulatory body. It's things move forward in a rather deliberate way, and they'll get changed or adjusted easily. I will say, certainly, we have a really great relationship here in New York with our regulators and our colleagues here. We even had the executive secretary join us at our leadership conference and give us her feedback, which is always good. But I love the thought of just having everyone sit down and think, okay, what do we think is best? And maybe it's the same, maybe it's not the same, and just have that conversation. I just can't help but wonder where that kind of conversation would take us. So I'm going to have to write that down, because that might be, I think that might be something for us to think about it in the coming time.
I know in the past there's been, hey, us against them and whatever it might be. And I think, honestly, maybe in the past things didn't have to change that rapidly because the amount of people that were in the profession, right? But as we know, when you look at the statistics, the amount of people who are coming up in retirement, all these things that are a little scary if you look at them in their individual silos. I know there are numbers out there that'll say, hey, the amount of CPAs or this number, the amount of CPAs or that number. But to me, it's almost like there should be even more than that. How can we all sit in a room where we feel very comfortable in our own skin with a blank sheet up there and say, what would it be best for the firm? What would it be best for small firms? What would be a big four answer? If we could get everybody in that room and just say, hey, listen, let's just have an open and honest conversation about that. I'd be really interested to see what we could come up with.
Yeah, no, I think that would be so interesting just to see where it takes us. I agree. And I think one of the good things, one of the great things, obviously, about being a first state is that it all began here. There'd be no CPA credential if it wasn't for New York. I know that sounds biased, but it's true that the first law was here. So this is reality. But one of the things that often becomes a challenge when you were the first is you sometimes can think that the way you've always done it is the way is the only way it can be done. I'm at least excited that because of, it's going to sound a little backwards, I realize, but because of the challenges we have with pipeline and because of the aging populations, and we've seen in many organizations, state societies are no different, AICPA, ASBA, to where long-term, highly respected and amazing leaders are all retiring. And we have so many changes that are happening that many of us, as we've come in team's role, at us recording time, I've only been in the role 2 years, but I'm by no means the newest state society CEO. In fact, I believe that if we were to break it down, I'm probably in the second third, like 1/3 of CPAs are actually newer. CEOs rather are newer than me. There's a lot of transition happening. So I think these kind of discussions and thought experience would be helpful. And if I go to one of the early things you said, because it seems to have come up on every podcast, it's not an official question, there always seems to be an unofficial one. You mentioned how CPAs don't have any TV shows. As a side question, if you had it, do you have a favorite fictional CPA or fictional accountant?
Other than the mass murderer who was in that one?
That was the accountant. And that was Ben Affleck in the account. I will say right now we are batting 1,000 on Ben Affleck coming up on the podcast. On every podcast he's come up. So we'll see if we can keep that going. And I will say, as I was chastised in the first podcast interview, I talked about my disdain for his character. Yeah. But I hadn't actually seen the movie. Someone found out, I said, you haven't even seen the movie I didn't play. I've seen the movie. It actually was a pretty good movie. I'm sorry, Ben Affleck. Yeah, I did enjoy the forensic accounting scene, but I'm not sure that's our best example of accounting.
There was that old movie, The Untouchables, way back in the day.
Absolutely.
When they get into some tax rules and things like that as to how they're going to go after people. But yeah, we just have to do a much better job of that corrosion things. And I think, too, it's imperative that we get people who look different, who are at different times of their careers, because honestly, if a 60-year-old person who's been in the profession for 40 years walks into a college room and starts talking about what they do, I don't know if that's going to resonate so much.
Sure.
And I think the other thing is, too, and you might have had this thought process, when I started at the firm, I knew from like day 3 that I wanted to be a partner. That's just how it was. My father's kind of golden rule to me was, you be the one that turns off the lights each night. So stay past the latest partner, whatever it was.
The big rule.
And now we have people that come here that don't want to be partner, and that's completely fine. Firms have been almost required to adapt and provide different paths for different people. Some want to be part-time, some want to be full-time, some know they want to be partner, some never want to be partner, whatever it is. And I think the more that firms are able to continue to provide individualized methodologies and approaches to each employee will help us a lot in retaining a lot of this talent. But if you think one plan's going to work for 30 people, it's not going to work. And then you can't talk about how hard it is to retain and recruit. It's because you're just not going to be able to keep up with the trends, unfortunately, that are out there.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And even when we think about managing or leading people, in one sense, you want to be fair, put my fingers up in quote, and treat everyone the same. But I think from managing leading, that's not really fair, because people have different needs. So you actually shouldn't treat everyone exactly the same. You should treat them fairly. So I mean that, but some people may need a little more time and support. Some may need less. You may find out that your best employee really needs to be literally left in the corner and they would just do magic, and you just need to trust them. And then there are other people you need to guide along. So that you have to learn how to manage your folks and make it so it's a comfortable environment for them.
I always think back to this. My family, we used to go on this really, low-cost ski trip every year.
Yeah.
And our first year going, in a way to teach us how to ski together, we all held on to this 10-foot skiing pole, and we went down the mountain together. And my sister, who's not athletic at all, she's falling, and the minute she falls, she takes the whole family down with her.
Because you're all holding the
same pole,
right?
You're all same pole. And so I'm thinking, does this seem like the best way to teach 5 people who range from height from 6'1" to 5'6", 5'5"? Does this seem like the best approach? And so every time we talk about individualized plans and not being able to do everything the same, I always think of that vision in my mind of 30 people in the same firm going down, holding on the stick at the same time and hoping for the best. It's not going to work.
That's such a great visual, and I think that is a great way of putting it. And it's interesting you say that in terms of how you knew early on that the partnership would be the track. I admittedly was not sure. I was just all right, I'm just going to ride this out for as long as it feels right. Did for a long time. But I do remember when I started at Andrew, when they did the introductions. I'm sure they do that from everybody introduced and say where they went to school and think about yourself. And one of my colleagues in the cohort was bold. Good for him. He said up front, he was here and he was president of his accounting side, and he was coming here and he intended to be partner. That's great. Now, do you want to guess who was the very first person to leave of our cohort within less than a year? And as it turns out, he's doing extremely well in another area. The public accounting wasn't for him. It happened. But it's one of those things to where you just never know where your path is going to go. Well, Kevin, I really appreciate the time you've taken with me. We've had a really great conversation. I wanted to ask you one last question. It's really, in case I forgot something, particularly with you as president of the society. But what's one more question that you wish I had asked, but I didn't? So basically, your time to say, here's what I also want to make sure we talk about this.
Yeah, I think I've, in throughout the discussion, and I could talk about this stuff all day long. It means so much to me. This is all I think about, how long I've been in this profession and at this great firm. It's more than half my life. I've started as a 20-year-old intern who knew nothing, and now I'm 47 and I know just a little bit more than then. But I'm surrounded by tremendous people at this firm that really help me with the vision and the strategy and all those types of things. And when you think about the team environment in which we work with, and we think about the hours that we have to put in at sometimes during the year, you really better like the people you work with, right? It really makes a difference that you can be yourself and not feel like you have to change or do anything different. You can just enjoy who you're around, because you're going to be around them for quite a bit. But I think through most of this conversation, I've talked about my perspective as a partner in a regional firm. I think to close out, if that's what we're doing, is talk a little bit more about the importance of the state society. We're the oldest state society in the nation. If you ever get a chance to walk down the halls of our newly renovated building, which will be coming pretty soon here, you can look at the pictures of the past presidents, and it's a who's who of people who have impacted this profession. And I'm not talking about like small impacts. I'm talking about some of the biggest impacts of the profession. And I know sometimes New York is a little late in getting things done, but we're never going to be a state that just jumps in wholeheartedly and tries to do something because someone else is doing something. Fine. If you think things are going to change by you sitting on the sideline, it will not change. And when I had the opportunity to be president-elect and then president, I had spoken to a lot of past presidents. I had spoken to a lot of people who are in charge and involved. I had spoken to other people who are in other accounting alliances. And my whole premise behind getting back involved was I got sick and tired of talking to people about things that they could never change anyways. You're just yelling and throwing stuff against the wall. You and I have talked about this a lot. For us to do what we need to do, it's all about the advocacy. It's all about our relationships with our local Congress people. It's all about getting out there and making sure that the things that we're trying to get done as a state society are imperative for the profession. They're not imperative for Kevin O'Leary. They're not imperative for Mengel Metzger Barr. It's imperative for the profession. And I think when you look at the people who are involved on the committees, and when you look at the people who are involved at the chapters and at the statewide board, you have a bunch of people who really are just trying to make the profession better for not only the next 12 months, but for the next 36 months, the next 72 months, whatever it is. You don't have a lot of individuals in there that are trying to do this because it's going to save a certain client tax dollars, or it's going to do this, or it's going to do that. We're here for us. And so for all the people out there that are maybe on the fence about getting involved, there are a lot of ways to get involved. And I think one of the things we'll work on as a society is explaining those ways a little bit more clearly through the year to say, hey, you can get involved at the chapter level, the committee level, the statewide level. There are plenty of opportunities available and that present themselves. And I will say, I never thought about what this role meant on a more global scale, but right. I've run into people who are in the profession that I don't really know. And the way they talk to me about me being the state society president, I'm like, I don't want to say I didn't think it was going to be a big deal, but it's
a big deal. Yeah.
It's a big deal to a lot of people. And so from that perspective, I take this role very seriously. And we have a lot to get done. We really do. And the only way to get that done is to have more people sitting around the table. It's have more people sitting around sharing experiences. And so when I think about our leadership conference up at Schooner Lake a couple weeks ago, the camaraderie that was built and the friendships that were built and they'll last a lifetime now with people I would have never met if it wasn't for this profession and being involved in society. I was introduced to some of the nicest, greatest people I think I've ever met. And then factor in that they've walked the same path that I've walked. Their experience is a lot of same thing. These are people that I can bounce ideas off. These are people that I can go to when I have something might pop up. And when you think about it, that's so valuable. It really is.
Absolutely.
If you have an opportunity to get involved in society, I would strongly recommend it. And even if you're one of these people that I don't know how I would want to get involved, we have plenty of people you can talk to that you can say, hey, I really like nonprofits and I really like doing this. How can I get involved? But I don't want to be on a chapter. We got a committee for you. We've got opportunities for everybody out there. And the more people we can get involved, the louder our voice. And that means a lot in Albany when it comes time to trying to get things done.
No doubt.
And you and I have talked about this too. We had our legislative day a few months ago. We had about 60 meetings scheduled in that one day, which is an all-time high. We talk about our co-op program, which is an unbelievable program here in New York State. We had more participants this year than probably the last 2 or 3 years combined. I think the
all-time high there too.
You can feel the momentum. You can feel the difference. And I just say, listen, it'd be great to get more people involved so we can make these waves just larger and last longer.
Absolutely. I could not say it better myself. And certainly you can see information about the society at our website, NYSSCPA.org. You can learn more about what we have going on. You can become a member officially. We're paying your dues, but to Kevin's point, we have 14 local chapters around the state, 50 committees involved. If there's an area of interest that you have, I can assure you we have it covered in the society. Hey, if we don't, then you might have the opportunity to help us create one.
Exactly.
So we are here to serve you. So Kevin O'Leary, board president of New York State Society of CPAs. It is such a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks for everything that you're doing for us.
All right, we are back following our interview with Kevin. Very exciting. You can hear his passion about the profession and his desire to move things forward. And in my mind, Kevin is proof on how early exposure to great professors and a great firm experience, can help keep a person engaged and excited about the profession. And I got to say, for one, as CEO of the society, I'm really excited about working with yet another board president who has a deep appreciation and excitement for the profession. So I want to thank you for making it through the end of this episode with Kevin O'Leary. I'm sorry for adding in yet another Ben Affleck reference, but if you liked what you heard, please subscribe now to get this podcast delivered to you when it is released. Also, please feel free to leave a review. In addition, if you aren't a current member of the New York State Society of CPAs, I urge you to learn more about our events and work and membership at NYSSCPA.org and follow us on social media. Lastly, if you have suggestions or comments or questions, you can also reach out to us at podcast@NYSSCPA.org. I hope to see you again soon. Thank you for listening.